Yeah. Thank you, Mark. You are there. You are there from the morning. You're from the Dr. Peter's session. Okay. So thank you, Mark, for joining and staying there all the way. Let me give a quick introduction to Mr. Mark Blackwell. Mark is experienced leader with expertise in driving growth and cost optimization. He excels in solving complex problems across product management, marketing, sales, and supply chain. With proven success in business transformations, he delivers actionable insights, ensuring impactful outcomes through strategic execution. One of the most important strength, or maybe that what Mark provides to his customers is he's just not a consultant who gives some advice and go. He's there to help until you achieve success. So, Mark, welcome to you, and then please you can take up your session. That is, I would like to enjoy your session. Thank you.
Thank you, Abdul. Thank you for a very kind introduction. Just you can just wave your hand to confirm that you can hear me and you can see my screen. That's great.
Yeah.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Good morning, good afternoon, everyone. It's a pleasure to be with you. I'd like to start with a story. And it's a story from much earlier in my career when I was working for a family company that was in talks to be acquired by a global chemicals giant. Now, I don't know if you've ever been in that situation, but it's that time where only you and the CFO and the CEO knows what's going on. And there's an endless stream of due diligence requests, which you've somehow got to find an answer to, and you don't have any data or systems to do it. And you've got to keep your day job going, and you can't let anyone know what's going on. And it's exhausting. And fairly long way through the process, I remember one evening, I received a note which says, "Can we have a copy of your company's strategy?" Oh. A problem. First of all, we didn't have a strategy. Secondly, I have to confess that time I wasn't really know what a formal strategy document would look like. And I was getting pretty tired. So what did I do? Well, I panicked a bit, but then I said, well, what I'll do is I'll just write down the 6 or 7 unwritten business rules that we run our business by and that we all know. And that's how we make decisions. And I'll just send that off and hope for the best and maybe sort it out when we meet face to face. And I can understand what they want. Well, a few weeks later when we met, to my surprise, these executives from this chemicals giant were actually pretty impressed. They liked the simplicity of what we was doing. And it sparked an interest in me ever since, really in how organizations succeed and fail in implementing strategy. And what I've come to realize is I've seen a lot of very impressive plans and strategy documents since. But that little half-page note that I wrote all those years ago was probably not far away from what something really ought to be in terms of what I think is strategy. So with that in mind, let me get you through and explain in this just some experiences I've had in my life about what works and what doesn't, and just a couple of ideas about what might be a good way to think about developing and implementing strategy going forwards. So why do we need to hardwire strategy? Well, clearly, most businesses have got complex challenges, so they will need some strategy to guide them through these day-to-day decisions to achieve the objectives. But what's become very clear is very few organizations are successful in able to embed a strategy so that it actually does influence their day-to-day work. We'll see some statistics on this which are frightening. So why is it that strategy fails to take root in an organization? And from what I can see, there are 4 areas that I'd like to talk about today. They come in groups of poor design in terms of the culture in the organization, gaps in the organization, and particularly how it manages the process of the strategy. And what might be something of bizarre that you might think I want to talk about as a consultant myself, the consultancy trap. So let's get it out of the way. Let me as a consultant tell you to beware of the consultant trap. Have you ever been in this situation? You're working for a company and a lot of guys come in suits and girls come in suits and very smart. They come in, do a lot of late night analysis of all the data and deliver a beautiful presentation to the organization. The CEO loves it because he looks so smart that all these great guys and girls have been doing this fabulous work. But over the next couple of weeks, nothing really happens beyond the town hall pitch because the team on the client side have no idea how to implement the strategy. And so what happens is nothing really works. A year or so later, no change in the business, consultants are hired in, and here we go again round the circle. And what I want to try and get you out of, my experience is falling into this trap, because I do believe it's a trap that can be broken free from. What happens with these consultants is you get short-term very intense engagements which might drain the client, as there's for drain requests. But at the same time, there's no development of the capability to think strategically by the client because the consultant is doing the work. So yes, you get a lot of beautiful slides, but no internal ownership. And without internal ownership, it's no surprise that many transformations fail. I think there's many different statistics you can look at this, but they come out at the range of 70% of transformations fail to hit the expectations of them. And of course, many of those will become ones which external consultants have been in. So there is a problem that consultants and businesses have to solve. We need to be thinking differently to make sure that we get the outcomes that we want. Let's just put some context into how significant this problem is. Only 28% of middle managers and executives could list any three of their company's strategic priorities, according to one survey. You've got to assume they've probably got 4, 5, 6, or 7. So that's poor. There's a communication gap. And I'd like to really talk about the simplification opportunity, because it's so tempting to think that strategy has to be complicated and you have to have an MBA from Harvard to be able to do it well. And therefore it has to be complicated and difficult. But the reality is complex strategies have a really poor likelihood of success. Be proud of having something that's beautiful and simple that people understand, because that's much more likely to get implemented and deliver outcomes. And think, there is an elegant beauty in simplicity that I feel is often ignored in strategy development and execution. So I found myself, and the chemicals giant, I can tell you, was DuPont. And I believe that they really knew how to do strategy. And for the first couple of years, I would listen to presentations developed by some of the big consulting companies, and you'd always end up in this slide, which was variations of a theme of the strategic pillars or the strategic themes. And we're going to have sustainable, profitable growth, best-in-class operational excellence, innovation leadership, best-in-class customer service, and any other number of aspirational goals that are all wonderful, but could have applied to any business probably. And indeed, they didn't give you any idea about what you had to do tomorrow morning to go and do the business, do your role. And if you actually looked at them, many of them were conflicting, no prioritization. So I think it's now time for the pillars to crumble. And we recognize that looking at strategy as a goal is just not helpful. We need to be thinking about it in other ways. Because I think this is one of the reasons why we all get so confused about strategy. Is there's so many definitions and so much complexity in the language. I mean, we get lost. We talk about strategy having a plan, having a 5-year financial goal, it being about long-term thinking, or it's only about choices, or the phrases like execution eats strategy for breakfast, or what's that, culture eats strategy for breakfast. And us mere mortals generally just get completely lost in what is strategy. And so no wonder we struggle to execute, or more correctly, implement what we're doing. So I think it's time to redefine and get some clarity. And there's a definition in the emergent approach to strategy about this has been coming from various strands of thinking, a lot of it influenced by Goldratt and theory of constraints, a lot very similar to Rumelt's work on strategy being the rule, which it talks about strategy being the central rule of a framework designed to unify all actions and decisions around busting the bottleneck to achieving the foremost aspiration. And we've got a clear definition here, I think, which for once provides guidance. And as we'll see, when you've seen that, if you're involved in a process, you know what to do the next day, which I never felt I knew what to do the next day at work after seeing a big presentation of strategic themes. By focusing on the bottleneck, and if you're familiar with the theory of constraints, it really enables you to focus resources on where they're going to have the biggest bang and secure the output. And it really helps as a result to align the organization, which is a major problem we have in hardwiring strategy, and be part of a larger framework. One of the things I should probably say up front now is Pete Compo and I have known each other for many years. And so we first met something like 2009, 2010, when we were both at DuPont working together, building, when he was building some of these early ideas. And then later years, I connected again just before the publication of the book. So we went through each chapter together as a bit of a sparring partner for him. So in that way, I've got some sort of deep knowledge of this that, I'm only going to be able to share a small part of the emergent approach, but I hope I pick some bits that might resonate with you, maybe discuss more in the future. But as I talk about this, the larger framework, as well as the definition of the strategy, what I found very useful is the way that the various terms that we use in strategy are organized in the framework, which brings to me a great clarity to a world which is otherwise chaotic. And for me, I think about them in 4 different areas. Aspiration, what is it we want to achieve? And that goes everything from the vision to the mission to the values to the goals. The diagnosis, which is what's happening, and the most important part to that arguably is the bottleneck. What is the bottleneck to achieving our aspiration? The rules, which is the strategy rule. The strategy is the rule by which we will overcome the bottleneck to achieve the aspiration. And finally, plans and metrics, which have got the milestones, the steps that we need to do, and the metrics. But I hope as you look at this way of organizing it, you can see that what people typically call a strategic plan, the list of actions, the goals, the metrics, actually is missing something pretty big. It's missing what is the strategy. What are the day-to-day rules which are going to guide us to get things done? And so again, I wonder, is it no surprise that people struggle with implementing strategy on a day-to-day basis? Because the strategy plan is just an aspirational thing that very often gets set, presented, and then forgotten, and everyone goes back to their day to work. And I keep coming back, that's the challenge we, as those who are interested in strategy, have got to overcome, because it's a very serious problem everywhere that we look and every statistics that we see. One of the tools that I absolutely love in the emergent approach is what is called the strategy triad, which connects this idea of the strategy being the rule which overcomes the bottleneck to achieving the aspiration. And because it is such a powerful tool, because without databases of data in Excel files and PowerPoints, a team of people can get together and start trying to figure out what is it that's stopping them achieving what they want. We can see here that this is done on a board on the internet with a tool, but it could just as easily be done on a whiteboard. But it's a beautifully collaborative tool, which doesn't require a lot of training, gets people to collaborate. And you know, if you get people to collaborate in the design of a strategy, you're halfway there to get, if not more, to getting them to buy in and overcome that major challenge that we have of getting people involved in executing and implementing the strategy. So love the tool, happy to talk about it more, but we're just going to have to today just move at a reasonable pace and give you a little taster of some of the ideas that I think we should be working on to hardwire strategy in organizations. So what is it, again, in summary, that the emergent approach is so powerful at? It gives clear language, which overcomes much of the confusion that we see with the strategy myths. So people can understand the components of strategy and have it mean something to them as a result. Powerfully, the concept of strategy being a rule gives you real-time guidance on what to do. This stops the strategy being a 200-slide PowerPoint deck that's stuck somewhere gathering electronic dust on a hard drive. It's something that becomes real and visible. And as Peter was exploring more this morning, the idea is that it's an agile approach in that it's iterative and adaptive to change in emergent. It's not a rigid plan. And it is certainly nothing to do with the annual budget rigidity that ties people up. And again, stops it being a strategy being guidance on how we make decisions, and ever so closely links strategy to financial goals, which then we start having some major problems. And we're going to probably explore some of those in the next couple of slides. But understanding the strategy framework and how to develop it is only half the problem. Once we've built all the components that are in those 4 boxes of the strategy framework, we now have to think about implementation and embedding it into your organization. And this is where something that I've also spent a lot of my life with, I think, can really come to fore once we understand what strategy is all about. And this is a process called integrated business planning that some of you may be familiar with. It's particularly relevant for companies producing products, but I've seen it adapted into other situations. And it's an evolution of sales and operations planning to put much more emphasis on the product portfolio, the financial plan, and the executive decision-making, to have a monthly process of meetings which give you the opportunity to review where you are against your strategy, to see if your strategy is working for you or if it needs adapting, and provides that rigor and that helps stop your strategy being a 200-slide deck gathering dust, electronic dust. And so, yes, this is something I've also spent a lot of my life implementing and working in businesses large and small. But I think we have to be cognizant why there needs to be linked with the ideas from the emergent approach to be a success. So one of the downsides of this is that strategy may become seen as to being purely financial goals. And it's just activities to close financial goals, which starts putting you into death spirals of, if you're not making the quarter's numbers, you start pulling orders in from the next quarter, and all sorts of bad behavior about overproducing to reduce your production cost to meet your numbers. And again, if you're not careful, the concept of strategy gets lost. And also, I want to talk later on in the presentation about metrics. And you often have a lot of emphasis on output metrics, lagging metrics, which say how well you've done. But without some other metrics, there's a risk of failure. And we'll go and cover a great, interesting study from Ford on that. And so without carefully integrating some of the great ideas from the emergent approach, I think that the IBP process can be potentially great, but sadly a bit ritualistic. Having said that, there are a lot of things that it does to overcome some well-known barriers to implementing strategy into an organization. And let's start with silos. We see silos in many organizations, and as I started off in a small family company moving into the size of DuPont, it shocked me to see how easy they are. But I've seen organizations across the world, and yes, they are a thing that we need to battle with. They limit the cross-functional collaboration that is absolutely essential for a business to operate by. And as one study shows, they reduce the chance of success by as much as 36% by, and that's no surprise. I'm surprised it's not even more than that. So one of the things that IBP can do to help overcome silos is this formal monthly 5-step process, which starts with the key functions of product demands and supply aligning together, building their plans over the next 24-month horizon and seeing what the issues are on a rolling basis. So this isn't an annual fixed 12-month budget. This is a rolling 24-month view that gets updated every month. And as the world goes on, there's inevitably going to be gaps. And this is where we fix them through integrated reconciliation and then the executive meeting, which is often known as the management business review. That discipline forces the collaboration. We are forced and bound by having one set of numbers. And in many organizations which have this, they do have multiple sets. You know, the sales guys will be committing to different numbers to the operation guys so that everyone can look good, but it creates a mess. So we force ourselves to have one set. And if we really integrate strategy into the process, it forces the middle managers attending these reviews to regularly update and communicate on a two-way basis with their teams on strategy and how to implement it and what needs to be done to do that on a updated regular basis and a live basis with what's happening in the business. And that needs to be done because organizations have a real problem, and I've been hinting at, here's some data, of getting their strategy, and we put that as a list of goals, having any connection with what's going with the day-to-day work. Numbers of studies, but the range was quite interesting as I was looking at this. 60 to 80% of businesses claim to have a near complete failure in connecting their strategy, and if we define that as strategy imperatives or goals, that's what I call the old school strategy, with their day-to-day work. We've got to do something about this. It cannot carry on. It's clearly not working. The data is telling us we need to be thinking differently. There's no doubt about it. So what else? One of the things we can do, and again, I like a tool from the emergent framework, and it's not novel to the emergent framework, emergent approach, but this idea of having nested frameworks. In other words, being careful that you have a business strategy which flows down across the functions that may flow down across more. It's just a simple one that looks at it, where each function has its own strategy framework. So yes, all the R&D functions here are constrained by what is designed by the business strategy, but they are responsible for creating their own. And as you do this flow down approach, of course, that enables and multiplies the potential numbers of people that can be engaged in the strategy design process, which should inevitably help the success of implementation because they're part of the ownership. They get ownership by being part of the design process. And again, we're all talking the same language and everything fits together because every process must be complete for the function, but at the same time, it is constrained by whatever guidance is given from the parent. So this is a great idea. Another idea is we talked about having this strategy rule, and then that gets broken down, the strategy, into tactics by which we can make decisions by. So that across the functions, whether it be R&D, operations, sales, marketing, we view the same rules on product segmentation, for example, as this chart shows here. And it enables, without having to meet it every now and then, we can just look at the table if we're in a conflict about what we do with an order coming in, whether to accept it or not, or how to treat it, just follow the table, which can obviously be upgraded over time if it's not seen to be working. But we now make strategy a living process that informs our day-to-day decisions, not just an on-the-shelf document, which is valueless. Appreciate it's a busy table. I'm just going to help explain it. I've just highlighted if you're in R&D and you're understanding, well, I don't really know how much time I should give to developing a product. You know where it sits from being a cash cow and on the block, which is a product that's going to choose between becoming a cash cow or going to be core or a new product. Some rules, and which by that gives you guidance on which to exploit, and we can see the same for pricing, same for customer service, and the like. Very useful, deriving day-to-day action from a strategy. Common in the literature, again, you see some similar numbers. Number of employees saying that they cannot implement strategy because they lack the resources, whether there be time, budget, or skills. Now, if we're living in a world of set the annual budget and forget, or worse, set the 3 to 5 year strategy and file that away, you're not going to be able to have a meaningful way of discussing where the plan is not workable because it's not got the resources. And so employees will just fester and get frustrated often. And lacking, and one key reason why strategies fail to implement. The discipline of the IBP approach of having monthly meetings, you get the potential for escalating decisions. And so these things address, and they will become exposed because you're looking at your 24-month plans on volume and price and financial integration. And it will become clear that projects, if they are under-resourced, it will become obvious in the plans. And so therefore, discussion is forced on either funding the plan, defunding something else, or killing the plan. But it will force the discussion. And that's what I love about the rigidity of having that process. Another issue I'd like to talk about is KPIs. Great case story that I want to read up on in just before the financial crisis of 2008. In Ford, they had hundreds of metrics across all of their organization. Many of these metrics actually were bottom up because they seemed like a good thing to do, not top down connected to the strategy. The problem was every metric was important. So the company was delivering great on units per day produced, sales targets hit, and all of the bottom-up targets which seemed to make sense on each function, but were not bound or connected in any way by a strategy. And indeed, as a result of working so hard on achieving these hundreds of metrics, the company failed to realize that the demand in the market was changing. People wanted different types of cars. There was a risk of money. There's people more concerned about having fuel-efficient vehicles, and they completely missed the trend because they were so busy meeting metrics and managing by the metrics that they failed to see what was spotting in the marketplace. And I think it's a good lesson for organizations to have the discipline of focusing on the strategy and really making sure the metrics that you manage your business by are those which will help you implement your strategy, rather than just having hundreds of them, which are because they're good things to do. Again, this reminds me so much of Goldratt and the theory of constraints. You can do lots of good things improving local optima, which are outside of the constraint, but they're going to make no difference to your business. Focus on what's going to matter. And that is identifying your bottleneck and seeing how well you are overcoming your bottleneck with your strategy to achieve your aspiration. And that rigor will dramatically reduce the number of metrics that you find yourself in your organization and give you the needed focus. So this is why the emergent approach recommends 4 steps. Foundation, adherence, and on leading and lagging metrics. My experience is typically organizations are overloaded on the right and underloaded on the left. What do I mean by that? So a lagging result, have we achieved our objective? We get a lot of praise. Yes, we're on budget this month. Yes, we've hit our goals for revenue. Yes, we've got our production costs down last month, last quarter, last year. Great, well done. But it's a bit late. It's too late to influence any action. So yes, organizations try to do a good job, and I think of leading metrics, which are indicators or input metrics to those, and a reasonable spread on them is important. But what is often missing is the foundation metrics and inherent metrics. Foundation metrics. But when we designed our strategy, we assumed that the market was going to grow by 2%. Does anyone ever go back and check what the market growth rate was? No. Especially if the market's actually grown by 10%, right? The paid people often tends to hide that fact. And boy, if you're doing well on your other metrics, but your foundation metrics, which suggested the market was going to grow at 2%, is now growing at 10%, you're kidding yourself if you're performing well on the others. So what you need to do is have a balance of these metrics and view them as a portfolio to see the pattern on how to interpret them, to understand, are you executing well against the strategy? Are you adhering to it? Are you performing well? Or are you lucky because the market's growing? Or is it time that you need to revisit the framework because it's not working as intended? And you can only make that interpretation by looking at the whole pattern together. But even the best KPI system can fail if we fail on another key issue, which is accountability. And this is something that we need, again, is a key reason for implementation failure. Leaders, and you're sure you must have worked with them at the time, who have seemed to be giving mixed messages all the time, and if every now and then we have a new priority, it does not take long before the employees lose trust. We have a major problem with employees really understanding what's expected of them and who really owns the metrics. And we've seen examples of this earlier in the presentation. It's no surprise that employees feel completely disconnected from the strategy. And so we've got to work on accountability. And again, I think if you do it well, IPP gives you a great opportunity to work on accountability. First of all, we have the rigidity of the system, which means leaders have to attend and discuss monthly at the MBR, and they're likely to be involved in other reviews depending on their role. By having one set of numbers which are clear across the organization, visible, there's clear expectations, which overcomes a major problem. We have ownership because we're forcing the strategy down the organization, especially with nested strategies, and then having a formal process for communication, top down and bottom up, which enables problems to be surfaced, and a formal process of escalating to move the process up through the decisions, which all of these activities combined help build accountabilities in organizations to help implementation strategy. That's it. One more thing. We talked about adaptation, and I'd love to talk about that more. But if there's one thing that's frustrated me more than probably anything else in my career, is what I call the adaptation. The adaptation is the annual budget prison. I'm sure others on the line have been there. Why we are locked in mentally to this concept that once a year, over a 12-month process, we have to fix everything with a great intensity, I don't know. But most organizations are still stuck in the sense that you must have an annual budget plan, and all the other months don't really need that intensity. Indeed, even worse, many organizations have a 3 to 5 year strategy plan, both of which have a sort of a set and forget mentality. So yes, you set the budget, but come January, when we start the new year, things change and we forget it and we make excuses and we try to fix it, but it doesn't really help us. But the world doesn't operate on this 12-month cycle. The world is disruptive. There's all sorts of things happening, but if you're stuck in the annual budget prison, you cannot respond. And there's lots of data out there which suggests that this is to be the case. Can we just kill the annual budget prison? Can we start having living strategy with regular iterative reviews and adaptation and change? Can we start doing something more like the IBP goal has, of viewing every month as the same, not 1 month out of 12 being any different? Can we see some advantages of doing this? And there are studies out there which says in disruptive periods, organizations which are more adaptive in their planning are 2.5 times more likely to be successful in their disruptive periods. So what have we learned? So I, as a consultant, are telling you, please beware of the consultant trap. Beware of the do-it-for-you consultant trap. Let's not think about strategy as being the strategic pillars or themes, which are just goals, which are ambiguous and conflicting. Let's think about having clarity in how we design and strategy, and let's get a collaborative approach which is accessible. IBP is just an example. There are other ways you can do it, but I'm trying to communicate that you need to make strategy living by having formal processes to plan, do, check, and act on what you've decided to do in your strategy and make it adaptive. So how are we going to do this? I say no to the do-it-for-you consultant trap, yes to the do-it-with-you Arcaro advantage. What is the do-it-with-you Arcaro advantage? It's working with you collaboratively to overcome some of the problems that we see in the classic consultant trap. That is, understand your problem. And it's not just, I mean, one of my favorite phrases at the moment of Einstein, he said, if he had 60 minutes to solve a problem, he would spend 55 minutes understanding it. Critical. Far too many people just go into solution mode without understanding it. But it's not just the nature of the problem. Indeed, deep part of it is understanding the culture of the organization. But because without understanding how things get done, what the culture of the organization like, the solution creation is not necessarily and unlikely to be appropriate. So then co-create, because by co-creation, you'll get the ownership, which will enable implementation. Coach the organization through that. And I guess I wish ask of all my clients, sustain it. Keep going. Roger Federer and all the other great tennis coaches, they have a coach 12 months a year. So there's no, and I ask them, in order to get this good idea, to have someone just keeping an eye on you, making sure that you're excelling and improving and sustaining your position. So thank you for that. I just leave you with a chart about our Caro and our 4-step approach to solving your challenges and getting the implementation with you. And we'd love to hear from you. And with that, I say thank you for the presentation and ask her any questions.
Wonderful session, Mark. It's really very interesting. I think you touch very important point that how these the strategy engagements take place. I think that slide is worth watching once again if you can go there. Okay.
Which one?
The 4 parts of the strategy engagement. Okay.
Usually, yes. Yeah. There you go.
No, the previous one. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So here, this is something which is very, very interesting. So any consultant come, they analyze and diagnose, deliver the presentation, and then leave it for the client. Okay. So here, even the clients knows about this, by the way. Okay, but still they do the same mistake again and again. Okay. So I remember our CEO way back in 2006-07, he was saying, guys, consultant is a consultant. Okay, so you will have a fantastic presentations and then fantastic explanations, and people will say yes to it, even if they are not sure. Then finally they end up in not getting the results. It's not all about it's not consultant fault. Okay, it's a company. They have to take care. If we are giving right input to the consultants, maybe consultants will give right recommendations. And also, it's all about engaging the client customers, the consultants. So that is very important that the overall results is something which matters at the end of the day. So this slide, I really liked it. Okay, and I liked your approach also. So here, I think we have a couple of comments. I think Louise and Nazira have throw some comments on it. Okay, so yeah, would you like to? Yeah, it's basically it's a comment. It's not a question. Okay, so both have they have comments on it. Okay, so one question comes into my mind is the IBP part.
Yeah.
Okay, one question, very typical question, very like a very generic question. IBP is actually very close to your supply chain manufacturing processes or any other. And then the strategy management, which includes like a strategy analysis, formulation, and then the strategy management, execution part processes, whether it could be a balanced scorecard or any other methodology, whatever, even the emergent approach, whatever. So how does that, the IBP, what do you advise? It stays in the middle between operations and the strategy. So what do you advise? My intent is to connect this IBP to the strategy, because it is more important to translate your strategy into operations. Okay. Otherwise, what happens is IBP gets disconnected from the strategy, even though they say it is connected, but in a large sense, sometimes there is a possibility that they do IBP or S&OP without touching the strategy. This is my experience, because I was a sales and operations planning coordinator for some period of time in 2005, 6, 7. Okay, I know that process, how it works very well. So what do you advise in this? Yeah.
So in theory, IBP should be there to help implementation of strategy. Right? And when you look at the training, that's what it says it does. My experience is that because people are so confused about what strategy really is, that they then take the financial aspect of IBP and view strategy as being a finance thing. I have sat in numbers in IBP meetings where you've had one chart, you've had the strategy number, which is the next 24 months derived from your IBP plan, from your strategy, your budget number, your current forecast, your last month's forecast, and it's a complete mess of numbers, which has lost its connection with strategy because people don't know what strategy is, right? And so it's sitting there frustratingly close to being a brilliant tool to enable strategy. But as I emphasized earlier in the presentation, because we've got ourselves completely confused about strategy, thinking it's goals, thinking it's then financial goals, we've made a missed opportunity.
Yeah, that's true, sir. In my experience, when I was taking care of sales and operations planning, so I was allowing the team to talk about financial part at the end. So I don't want them to bring the financial part to the beginning, because the moment we talk about numbers, financial numbers, everything gets into backdrop. So here you talk about your demand part, your supply part, the balancing it, and then connecting to strategy. You do this first. Then you
What
will.
I'm saying is, remember the strategy framework that we talked about, the 4 boxes: the aspiration, the diagnosis, the strategy, and the plans and metrics. Make sure that the plans and metrics are, for starters, fully embedded in the process. So that you're looking at each step in the process. Am I following the plan, right, that I put out? Am I meeting my milestones? And then make sure that the metrics follow that 4-station design, right? So I'll not only have metrics which say, did I do a great job in the last quarter or not? Include leading indicators of that, but also the adherence metrics. Am I adhering to the rule? One thing we haven't discussed is the definition of strategy execution is, am I following the rules that I said I was going to do? And check on that. And also check on the core assumptions on the plan that I made were based on these foundational assumptions. Are these foundational assumptions still true? So check on those things during the process. And my argument is that probably not there's a lot of lagging indicator metrics, some leading, often bottom up, not top down. But if you do that, you can then start better making the right bridge between the emergent approach and IBP as tools to enable hardwiring strategy.
Fantastic point. Fantastic point. So now this, since we had one very good session from Dr. Campo, and you covered the rest of the part, how touch on every corner of the overall transformation. Okay. So now the emergent approach and IBP, I think you already talked about it. Can you highlight it? How does that work together? I think you have 1 or 2 slides in that. Okay. So the emergent approach and then IBP integration.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
So I think where strategy has fallen foul over the years because we have found ourselves utterly confused by terminology, and even people in the same room have completely different approaches, and we have found ourselves falling into the trap of seeing strategy as goals. So it doesn't really help us. One of the key parts of the emergent approach is a rule by which you bust the bottleneck to achieving your aspiration. Once you start thinking of strategy like that, it becomes something that you can test against, are you doing it, and help make decisions. So then when you come with that lens into an IBP process, you can put the metrics into the system to check, are you making your right decisions? Without that lens, you fall into the trap of thinking that strategy is achieving financial goals. If you start getting your head into the track that strategy is about achieving financial goals, you are ever so tempted to start doing bad things for your business. You're saying, the right thing I have to do is to hit strategy, right? And then you say, strategy is financial goals. Then you say, oh, we're a bit short on orders and sales this month. Why don't we pull a few from our friendly customers in so that we can make the numbers this month, right? That's not solving the problem that you are not implementing well. That's making it worse because you've fallen into the trap of thinking of strategy as being financial goals. What you should really be doing is asking yourself, one, am I adhering to my strategy rule? If I am, but I'm not getting the sales that I expected, is the problem that my strategy is wrong? Or is the problem that my foundational assumptions are wrong? That will start you driving rich questions in how to fix your situation in. But sadly, once you think that my problem is strategy is financial goals, you go into lazy mode of pulling orders forward or reducing unit production costs by overproducing and building working capital. Those decisions get you further from success. It's like taking too much, it's drinking too much and getting drunk. You think it's going to be great, but you wake up with a horrible hangover and you're not going to be in a fitter way to do it. And so in terms of trying to bring the two, it's just thinking about strategy differently opens your mind up to a new way of executing the IBP process.
Fantastic, fantastic. So one more question. Now, we need to have some kind of strategy reviews every month or every quarter or whatever, definitely. So all our strategy assumptions to validate them and to make sure that the performance is going on as per the plan or whatever. Okay. Now, so the strategy reviews and then this IBP meetings. Okay.
Yeah.
So these IBP meetings in classically they are monthly process.
Yeah.
Okay. How do these meetings work together? So how to schedule them in your experience?
Well, I think the point is in your IBP review, you're looking at how you're performing against your strategy framework. So is my product development plan as a product manager, am I hitting the goals in terms of when I thought I was going to be bringing new products to market that I put in my product management strategy, that you review that in the product review. So you review your plan as much as you review the metrics in each of the review. So I mean, one of the reasons why we have this ridiculous dichotomy, in my view, between strategy and execution is that we think strategy is different to running the business. And therefore, because we have this concept of running the business, and then we need to do a strategy review, and the two things are somehow a different philosophy. Implementation of strategy is running your business. That's what it is. There is no separate strategy review process. The process of implementing strategy is running your business. Yeah, it cannot be anything else but that.
Yeah. So any key decisions of strategy could be part of the IBP meetings itself.
Yeah, exactly. That's how it should be.
That is something very interesting point. Very interesting point, Mark. Yeah, very interesting. Because very few people talk about both at the same time, strategy and then IBP or S&OP. Okay, so those who are from supply chain domain, okay, so they if they do strategy, they like to connect both. Okay, almost always I have not seen somebody who do the supply chain and the IBP, S&OP, they do the strategy. Okay, it's other way around usually. So I like because I belong to the same category because I was doing S&OP and then strategy. So there is a close. There could be some points where the strategy reviews will differ in defining KPIs, analyzing the assumptions, the strategy assumptions. Maybe they need to initiatives. So there may be some kind of thing, but there is a lot of overlap in that. If they can combine this, that's something which is very interesting.
I mean, because it is about running your business. Strategy is about the process of generating change and innovation within your organization. As soon as we start thinking that the components of the strategy framework are separated from each other, we are condemning ourselves to fail to implement.
Perfect, sir. Perfect.
Yeah.
So there is a comment, Sirichaya. Okay, so how to fight, if you are able to read it, how to fight to change the old way of thinking. Be nice. Discussion style preference in the brackets while do it with you. So mixed points from both Peter Compound and Mark Blackwell. Okay, so he says it's a comment. Did you read it, Mark?
I'm sorry, the way I've got my screen set up, I can't see the question. Sorry.
And then just look at it. Yeah.
So I think, Sirachai, it reminds me of the conversation that we had earlier on with Pete, is start small, go for little wins, show it works. Yeah. I mean, if you're thinking you may be in a fortunate situation where you have leaders which are enlightened, which want to try something new and can see this. But if you're a middle manager, let's work together on a project just to show the ground up the power of the triad in addressing simple problems and challenges in the organization, and let it emerge within the organization by proving its own success.
Perfect. So any final thoughts, key takeaways, Mark?
Well, I thank you very much for doing it. It's something I'm very excited by. I mean, I have had a passion for this for a long time, and I hope to keep this passion going for a few years yet, many years yet. So yeah, very, very happy to talk to anyone offline. I've got my contact details on the screen, and encourage you. By the way, would encourage people to sign up on LinkedIn to our Caro, because I'm going to be producing some follow-up articles which echo some of the themes that I've been presenting today, and if people are interested, and then we can engage and discuss further. Because we've only been, as you know, within the short time, you can only cover a fraction, and it's frustrating the bits that you left out, but I'd hope to carry on with that later. So thank you very much indeed, Arjun. Thank you.
So thank you, sir. Thank you very much.